This is the Easy Betting Show. My name is Easy, and we finally have football again. Um, I'm sure y'all are as excited as I am, which is why y'all are watching this. If not, I just told you to watch it, and that's fine too. um, as it says in the description, title, ticker, everything else, I'm going to be talking about the Week Zero picks that are tomorrow. Um, Most of you know only 4 games tomorrow, so this isn't going to be a super long video. But more or less, it's just because I haven't made a video myself in a while, and it's kind of a get back into the swing of things video on top of just I want to put out picks. This is what I like. Figured I'd share it and go through the process with y'all again. Um, as always, if you've watched any of my videos before, it is just going to be me. So make sure you put anything you want to say in the comments. If you have any bets that you like, or if you disagree with me, or I say something stupid, let me know in the comments. Also, give me a like because I'm new to this, so it helps me out a lot. But yeah, other than that, I'm just going to get right into it. Like I said, only 4 games, so it's going to be fairly quick. But still have a fair bit of bets for these 4 games that are going on tomorrow. So plenty of money to be made with these. And it should be 4 good games, but for different reasons as well. They're not going to be all be like good close games, but I think we will get a couple of those. So I'm just going to go down the list in order of how they're going to be played tomorrow. So the first game tomorrow, we have Florida State and Georgia Tech. That one's over in Dublin, Ireland, which is really weird to me. I know they've done this the last couple of years. Notre Dame beat the hell out of Navy last year over in Dublin. It's great that they're playing games over there, but for it to be an ACC conference game to open up the season and you're playing it overseas doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Notre Dame Navy made a lot of sense because other than just being a regular season game, it didn't really matter that much to either team. Whereas with this, especially as competitive as the ACC is going to be this year, this could be a big game for Florida State, and they have to travel halfway across the world to play it. So it doesn't make a ton of sense for me there, but that being said, it should still be a lot of fun. And if anything, it could make it a little bit closer. As for the game itself, obviously not having football for the last months, everyone has been looking at this game specifically in depth because it's just the first game of the season. And it's kind of split on what people think is going to happen. You can kind of see that with the movement on the line a little bit. It opened up, I think, at Florida State minus 14.5, and now it's all the way down to 10.5. And a lot of the public is betting Florida State because they're ranked 10th in the nation. Georgia Tech only went 7-6 last year. On paper, Florida State should beat the hell out of Georgia Tech, and that should be the end of it. But the quote unquote sharps are leaning Georgia Tech because of the way that their offense produced last year. Florida State lost pretty much their entire team. And just with the playmakers and offense that Georgia Tech has, they could make some noise. As for my take on it, I'm kind of split. But I'm just going to kind of go through everything, and I'll tell you why I'm split. For starters, on the Georgia Tech side, they bring back pretty much all of their offensive playmakers. Haynes King, quarterback, he's back. He threw for 27 touchdowns last year. He also ran for 10 touchdowns last year, I believe over 700 yards on the ground as well. They also bring back 3 of their top 4 rushers from last year. Now, one of them is hurt and won't be playing in this, but I don't think it'll affect them that much because they still have other guys that can run just as well for them. So I don't think that hurts them, especially as much as people are saying that it will. They also bring back 3 of their top 4 receivers, and they bring back 4 starting offensive linemen from last year. So they're going to be seasoned pretty much across the board. As well as bringing in some depth. And then on the defensive side of the ball is kind of where I guess their weak spot is. Their D line is kind of weak, and going against an offensive line like, Florida State's going to put out there, that's going to be a struggle for them. So that's probably going to be the make or break point for Georgia Tech in this game is the defensive line. Now, their secondary isn't that bad. They're not unbelievably good or anything. But they're much better than the defensive line is. There's a reason why Georgia Tech's defense was like 107th or something like that against the run game last year. It's going to be a struggle for them to go against the run, probably for Florida State. On the other side, for Florida State, they don't bring back much. Like I said, they either sent all of their guys to the NFL. A lot of guys hit the portal. They don't have a ton of guys they're bringing back, but they did go shopping in the portal, so they brought a lot of guys in. They got DJ. I'm gonna try his last name, but I don't think anybody actually knows how to pronounce it. DJ Ungalele or something like that. DJU, that's what everybody calls him. From Oregon State, he comes in. Now, he did fairly well at Oregon State last year. He wasn't incredible, but if you remember what he did 2 years ago at Clemson, he looked rough at Clemson. I wouldn't trust him at all if he was the same player that he was at Clemson. But he goes to Oregon State and he does much better. He's still not unbelievable, which is why I don't trust him entirely. But you don't really know what you're going to get from him, especially now that he's got Mike Norvell as his coach. He could take another step forward and be really good for them. It's just kind of a question mark. On top of that, they brought in Alabama transfer Roydell Williams, who should give them a pretty good run game. Obviously, they're going to be good on both sides of the line because Florida State gets good linemen. So, like I said, the Georgia Tech O-line against the Florida State D-line could be what decides this game. That being said, the bet that I like is over 55.5. I'm getting that at minus 106. That's probably my favorite bet for this one. If I had to pick a line, I would go Florida State minus 10.5. I just think that they're too big on the line and they're just going to kind of bully the Georgia Tech offensive line. But that being said, I think they put up points. The quarterback, Haynes King, being a mobile quarterback, I think is going to help Georgia Tech tremendously because even if Florida State's D linemen do get in the backfield, he has a chance to, run out of it. And they probably are going to do a lot of, design runs with him as well. So that's going to not only open up the playbook because you have a running quarterback, but it's also going to open up the field and give them a much better chance, in my opinion, to score. I also have a few player props for this game. If you live in a state where you can do player props, congratulations. If you don't, I don't either. So I can't even bet these unless I go down to North Carolina, which I'm going to try to do tomorrow morning. So I probably will be actually betting this with y'all, but at least you don't have to take a drive. I have to take a drive. That being said, the player props that I like for this game are guys that I've already touched on. Roydell Williams, over 71.5 rushing yards. I think that's going to be fairly easy for him. It actually kind of seems low to me a little bit. Like I said, Georgia Tech's defensive line, they did bring in a couple guys to try to shore up the defensive line, but you can only do so much with one that was so bad last year. I think he gets well over this. The other one that I like is Haynes King, over 45.5 rushing yards. Like I just talked about, he's going to have to run the ball in order for this offense to move down the field, in my opinion. So 45.5 seems like a pretty easy get for him, especially for a quarterback that went over 700 yards last year. He'll just kind of continue that pace. So those are the two that I like. And then also Jamal Haynes, anytime touchdown. He's probably going to be Georgia Tech's main source of scoring in this, if I had to guess. But even if he's not, I still think he's got a pretty good chance of scoring. And then the last one for this one is Roydell Williams, 2+ rushing touchdowns. Like I said, Florida State should be able to run down the field pretty much at will. Roydell Williams should have a great game. There's no reason to think that he can't get 2 touchdowns. And the odds are plus 240, which are, pretty good odds for him to score 2, being that he's, in my opinion, going to be the guy in this game. The odds for the other ones, Jamal Haynes, anytime touchdowns, plus 102. So you are just getting plus money for that. And then Roydell Williams rushing yards is minus 114, and Haynes King's rushing yards is also 114. So I know I went through that fast. Just rewind it a little bit if you actually want to get that more in depth. But yeah, those are the ones that I like for that game. The next game that I'm going to talk about is Montana State versus New Mexico. And if you've paid attention or looked into this one at all, you'll notice that this is a weird game because Montana State, who is an FCS school, is 13.5-point favorites right now over the Mountain West team, New Mexico. It is not often that an FCS school is favored over an FBS team, but it's probably very rare to be favored by 2 touchdowns. That being said, they should be favored by 2 touchdowns. Montana State is ranked 4th in the preseason FCS poll. They almost beat North Dakota State last year. They lost in overtime by a point. They are going to be pretty good this year. They bring back a lot of their guys on offense, including their quarterback, 3 of their top 4 rushers, their top pass catcher. They did lose 2 offensive linemen to the FBS, but they had a lot of depth last year on the line, and they had some injuries on the line last year. So the guys that are coming up to be the starters this year got a decent amount of playing time last year. So they're basically bringing back 5 starters on the line too, depending on how you want to look at it. So most of their offense is coming back this year, kind of similar to Georgia Tech's. On defense, they're also bringing back a ton of guys, which is the difference from the last game. They're bringing back 3 starters on the line, 2 of their 3 top linebackers, and a bunch of pieces in the secondary. So they should have quality guys on both sides of the ball. Now, the polar opposite side of that, New Mexico only brings back 2 offensive starters, and neither one of them are on the line, so they're going to have an entirely new offensive line this year, which typically does not bode well in the first game of the season. They bring back most of their defensive front, but kind of like Georgia Tech, they were really bad in the rush game last year. They were 108th last year against the run, and if you're that bad on the defensive side of the ball and most of the guys came back, they're probably not going to be any better. Or if they are, it's probably going to be marginal. So I don't really know if them coming back is a good thing necessarily. The other thing about their defense that I don't really like against Montana State is they run a 3-3-5 defense, which for those of you that don't know what a 3-3-5 is, it basically means you have 3 defensive linemen and then 3 linebackers and 5 in your secondary. Well, Montana State is a run-heavy offense. They basically run 3/4 of the time. They also have a quarterback that runs a lot. So to only have 3 defensive linemen against a team that runs the ball a lot is obviously not a good setup. Now, Bronco Mendenhall, who's in his first year at New Mexico, you might remember that name from UVA a couple years back where he kind of sucked. He might have them change their defense for this game because Montana State's so run heavy. But if you're going to run that defense for most of the season, if not the rest of the season, why would you change it for one game at the beginning of the year? It doesn't really seem to set you up for success. So it's basically, do you want to kind of screw up this game, or do you want to potentially screw up your next 2 or 3 games because you practiced something that you don't even want to run for week 1? So I think that could be really interesting to see what they do on the defensive side of the ball. And that could dictate a lot of what happens here. That being said, I think Montana State runs this game. I just don't trust New Mexico. They didn't bring any pieces back. They have a new first-year coach. Their defense is a massive question mark to me. So I do have Montana State minus 13.5. I got it at minus 112. It's not going to be my biggest bet of this slate, but it is going to be one that I really like. Because I do think Montana State is going to be in the driver's seat for pretty much the entirety of this game. You got to remember also, a lot of people probably hear people like me that say Montana State's going to win this by 14 and say there's no way an FCS school can beat an FBS school, and that's point blank period. You have to remember the top of the FCS is probably better than a third of the FBS. Just because they're down there doesn't mean they can't beat anyone up there. Take a look at North Dakota State from years past. They've beaten ranked teams before. JMU, before they moved up to the Sun Belt, they beat Virginia Tech. They beat somebody else that I can't remember. West Virginia, maybe? I don't remember. App State, though, also beat West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Michigan. So it's possible, but not only is it possible, it's very doable for these top tier teams of the FCS. So don't look at FCS FBS and just place your bet. Actually look into the teams. There's a reason why Montana State is ranked 4th in the FCS preseason poll. One more bet that I have in this one is Ty McCulloch anytime touchdown. I think it's McCulloch. I don't know. I don't know these people in person, so I'm just throwing guesses at their names. If you actually want to tell me how to pronounce it, go ahead. Ty McCulloch anytime touchdown. It's plus 110. He's Montana State's #1 receiver. They are going to throw the ball. I know I just spent 5 minutes talking about how they're a run-heavy team, but they're going to throw the ball. And on a New Mexico team that's not very good, he should definitely get his looks, and he'll get a couple of looks in the red zone. So, again, this isn't a heavy bet that I would put, but it is one that I like and I will bet personally, especially at plus money. You always like plus money touchdown odds. The next two I'm not going to talk about as much as the first two, just because they're going to be blowouts. That's pretty much the easiest way to say it. But just because they're going to be blowouts doesn't mean you can't make money off of them, and that's what we're here for. SMU versus Nevada is the next one. SMU is 26.5-point favorites in this one, and there's a reason for that. Nevada is awful. On top of that, SMU is in their first year in the ACC. They are going to use this game as a statement to the ACC that we're here, we deserve to be here, and y'all should be worried about us. Preseason, they were projected to be in the top half of the conference, which for the ACC isn't saying too much because the bottom of the ACC does suck. But I think that they believe they should be higher than they were. And with the year that they had last year, maybe they do, but you never really know. So they're going to use this game as, hey, we're here, we're coming, y'all should be worried about us. And Nevada's just going to kind of take it. SMU, like I said, they were great last year. They only lost 2 games in their conference. Or actually, no, I'm sorry. They went 8-0 in their conference. They only lost 2 games on the season. They bring back pretty much everybody. Preston Stone's back at quarterback. They had a 3-headed rush attack last year, and all 3 of them are going to be back this year. Most of their receivers are back, and their kicker is back, which I know most people don't really care about, but he only missed 1 kick last year. So obviously that's going to factor in to have that guy in there. So great on the offensive side of the ball. And then I'm not even really going to talk about their defense because I don't think it's going to matter. Nevada has a first-year head coach, Jeff Choate. I don't know how to say his name. It doesn't matter. He was the head coach of Montana State last year. Obviously, like I said, they were really good last year, so he moved up. He probably should have stayed at Montana State, but Nevada probably paid him a whole lot more money, so I don't blame him for leaving. That being said, he's not in a very good spot. He could turn it around this year. Like I said, he was good at Montana State. There's no reason to think he couldn't do that at Nevada, but it's not going to be in week 1 against a good SMU team. He only has 8 starters from last year, 4 on the offensive side of the ball, 4 on the defensive side of the ball, and there's just not a lot going for him right now. So I am hammering SMU minus 26.5. This is probably my favorite bet of this slate. It's minus 118, minus 26.5. I think they probably win by at least 5 touchdowns. It just seems too easy for them. I also have Jalen Knighton over 61.5 rushing yards. That is SMU's top rusher. Like I said, they do have that 3-headed attack that they use. So it's not going to be a heavy full slate of Jalen Knighton, but he should get his touches. And I wouldn't be surprised if all 3 of them could get over 61.5. So that's minus 112. I definitely think he hits that. I'm also going to do him to have 2+ rushing touchdowns. This one isn't as safe as a 61.5 rushing yards. For obvious reasons, it's plus 210. So that should tell you right there. But obviously, other guys, including the 2 other rushers, they could steal a touchdown from him. But that being said, I think there's a great chance he scores 2, and at plus 210, you put half a unit on it and you hope it hits. That's what I'm going to be doing. The last one that I like in this is Jake Bailey over 34.5 receiving yards. That's minus 114. He was their leading receiver last year. He didn't get like crazy #1 stats, but he was their #1 guy. So 34.5 receiving yards against a defense that's not going to be good for your number one receiver just seems really low to me. And like I said, I think they bust this open. It's entirely possible that Bailey has, 40, 50 receiving yards in the first quarter. So those are the 4 plays that I like for that third game. And then the last game of the slate is Hawaii versus Delaware State. If you're on the East Coast like I am, this game's at midnight, so I guess you could call it Sunday, but it doesn't matter. And this is another one that's going to be an absolute blowout. Hawaii is heavily favored for good reason. It's Delaware State. It's pretty much all you need to say about that. I'll say a little bit more, though. So for starters, Delaware State, obviously, for those of you that aren't good at geography, Delaware State's over here with us on the East Coast, which means when they play this game tomorrow, it is going to feel like midnight, even though they've been there for a week. Of course, their flight got delayed because they missed it because they had a flat tire. So they're not even there as long as they wanted to be. So it's really going to feel like midnight when they're playing this game. That's going to hurt them out the gate. I got there. But on top of that, Hawaii is just a much better team. They play in the Mountain West. Timmy Chang's in his second year as head coach. He does a lot on the offense. Now, Hawaii's weak points are their offensive and defensive line, but that shouldn't really matter against Delaware State. So he should kind of just be able to do whatever he wants on the offensive side of the ball. I think they put up a ton of points here, especially early. The only reason why I'm not going to take Hawaii to cover, one, because it's a 30-point spread and I hate taking those. But two, Hawaii does not have a ton of depth, which means they're probably going to pull their starters earlier than most teams would. And even if they don't, they're still going to pull their starters because they're going to have a massive lead, which means there's a great chance here for Delaware State to get a backdoor cover. But what that does help is the over. So the bet that I'm going to be taking here is over 54.5, which is minus 120. I would actually get this in now if you can, because I've seen it as high as 56.5. I think it's going down because of the whole Delaware State debacle, but I still think they're going to score points. But there's definitely a chance that it goes back up. So I would probably get that in. The other thing that I'm going to do for this game is I'm going to keep an eye on the spread during the game, because this could be great potential for a live spread bet. If you see the Hawaii starters get pulled and the spread's still ridiculous, it's worth a look to get on Delaware State, plus 40 or whatever the line could be at the time, because they're going to be going against the backups and they'll probably be able to score points. So something else to look at, but I do like the over 54.5. So to quickly go through everything else, just in case you missed something or you want to hear it again, the bets that I like for tomorrow are Florida State and Georgia Tech over 55.5. I'm leaning Florida State minus 10.5, but I'm not going to bet that. I'm just sticking with the over. Jamal Haynes anytime touchdown. Roydell Williams 2+ rushing touchdowns. Roydell Williams over 71.5 rushing yards and Haynes King over 45.5 rushing yards. Montana State minus 13.5, which a lot of people won't like, but that's awesome. And Ty McCulloch, maybe pronounced differently, I don't know. Ty McCulloch anytime touchdown. Also, SMU minus 26.5. Jalen Knighton over 61.5 rushing yards. Jalen Knighton 2+ rushing touchdowns. And Jake Bailey over 34.5 receiving yards. And at midnight, unless you're not on the East Coast, and then it's some other time, Hawaii and Delaware State over 54.5. And keep your eye on the live spread during the game, because there could be some extra money there. That's all I got for these. Keep an eye on my channel. I'm going to be doing this regularly. I'll be doing college football games. I'll probably break up those games throughout the week. So I'll have at least one show a week, but I'll probably have 2 a week, depending on how many games there are and that kind of thing. Also, NFL's coming up in a couple weeks. I'll be doing an episode for the NFL every week as well. So toss a like on this video for me if you would. Make sure to subscribe, because I have like 8 subscribers right now, and it'd be awesome to get to double digits. Yeah. And I appreciate everyone that hung out with me. and I'll see y'all next time. Thanks.